This is me. I was born in the 1900s. No, none of you got that. Cool. I'm glad the older ones got that. All right, go for it. So, part of my testimony is I grew up in a Christian home, guys. I was around Christianity my entire life. Okay, I could take you down to the very second that I got saved when I was 7 years old. I could tell you all the smells and everything about it. I got raised up in the church. I went to church every Sunday. Some of you might remember LeeAnna's. Anyone? You guys remember that? Okay, see? Shows my age a little bit. But really, guys, I went to youth group, and when I got out of youth group, I just fell apart. I was doing the wrong things, hanging out with the wrong people, and it drove me down this path into anger. Like we were talking about earlier, one sin moves into another. Okay, that was perfect. That was exactly what my life was doing. That's exactly what I was doing. Okay? I had massive anger problems, okay? It wasn't until really just before I was like 23, 24, something around there, where I really started to understand what the problem was, and then she was able to help me bring me out of it, okay? My dad died a few years after that, and it really just kind of made things spiral out of control a little bit. I was not a nice guy. Wasn't really all that fun. But now, God has helped me to get to where we're at now. He's helped me to really focus on the things that are around me and things that are, honestly, the blessings that we have. You know, we moved here from Colorado. I've lived in Colorado my entire life. This is the farthest I've ever been from my childhood home. Okay? Man, it's a hard thing to do. It stirs up a bunch of things, but God was there with us. You know, we've been here since August, and all you Southerners are awesome. November, we've been here since November, sorry. Yeah, all you Southerners are pretty awesome, just so you guys know that, okay? But for real though, guys, focus on God, focus on the Word. You know, that's what's going to be the best thing for you. That's really my testimony. You know, again, grew up in a Christian church, like some of you are. Okay, grew up in a Christian family, like some of you are. Doesn't mean that it's going to be the easiest thing for you. You're still going to have challenges. You're still going to have those things you got to go through. But everyone else's testimony is pretty awesome. My testimony is kind of just like blah. Her testimony is awesome. You guys are going to love it.
No, you have a great testimony.
Thank you. You can skip the next slide. This is when we got married in 2013. The next slide is our daughter Elliot. She was born in May of 2015. I had no desire to have children, but God knew better, and I love being a mom. Our next slide is our son Micah. He was born in March of 2017.
He aspires to be a model.
The picture of him as a baby, we call his fat baby model picture. But then our one in the middle, his older sister locked him out, and of course I took a picture before I let him back in. But if you go to the next slide, it is our puppies. That is Stitch and Arwen. They're 80 pounds of fur ball, and we love them.
How many of you like Lord of the Rings?
Like 5 people.
You guys know who Arwen is? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Our next slide, that is our family in Colorado right before we moved, the beautiful mountains.
And that's not really, that was a very wet.
Yeah, it's not usually that green. If you go to the next slide, we felt that last year, 2 years ago, that God was calling us to South Carolina so that we could homeschool our kids. So in November, we packed up everything we had. I quit my job for the first time. I worked there for 14 years, so it was a big deal for us to just walk away from everything. So we decided to move here so we can homeschool our kids, so here we are. The next slide, that's me as a baby. I am older than Google, which yes, I'm also that old. The next slide is me and my siblings. I have a brother who's 10 years older than me, a sister who's 7 years older than me, and then a brother who's 2 years older than me. So I was a baby. I had the luxury of having 2 wonderful older siblings who basically raised me. So that kind of starts my testimony. Unlike most people who live here or going to church. I grew up in the opposite home of Ben. I grew up in a very broken home. My parents did a lot of drugs. They were in and out of jail. I went to foster care at one point. I was back at home. By the time I was 16, my mom left, and I decided to go to my own, and I moved in with my ex-boyfriend. We partied all the time, all the time. I spent my time trying not to feel things and trying not to live the life of my childhood, and through that, I decided to do the same thing my parents did. And so by the time I was 19, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I got a job at a Christian daycare center, and I sat in my interview and told my boss, "It's great that you're a Christian, but I'm an atheist." And she hired me anyways. So she told me on my interview that she needed me to have my life together if I was going to work at her daycare center. And I was like, I can do that. I was really dedicated to my work. I came onto my first day of work, and I got a phone call from my sister that my mom was going back to prison, and her 2 children were going to have to come live with me. So I was 19 and taking care of my 26-year-old sister and her 2 kids, and had to go to work the next day and tell my boss, "Hey, I know I told you I had my life together, but turns out I don't." And that really started one of the darkest years of my life. I really struggled with depression and anxiety. I drank a lot more. I did a lot more drugs. Still went to work the next day and put on a face for everybody. Through my time of working there, my boss only let us listen to Christian radio, which I know sounds bananas, but I would wake up in the middle of the night after a night of partying, singing songs about a God that I didn't even believe in. And about 6 months into me working there, I started praying to a God I didn't believe in. And almost a year after I started working there, I had a really, really crazy night of partying. I was not okay. I knew that something was really wrong. Everybody in my house was underage and couldn't drive me anywhere. So I started praying again into a God that I didn't believe in, that if he just saved me that night, that I would dedicate my life to him and live for him. The next morning, I was like, wow, that was weird. A week later, I decided I was going to try to party again, and it was the last night ever that I did that. It was also a really terrible night. The next Sunday, I went to church. It was a testimony service that I went to, and in that, somebody said, explaining salvation to somebody who is unsaved is like explaining a rainbow to the blind. It's something that you can't explain to your friends. It's something that they just have to feel once they're there. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I finally felt joy. And it wasn't from alcohol, it wasn't from guys, it wasn't from drugs, it was actually joy. Since then, I've been sober. So I got saved like 2 months before my 21st birthday. I think that God had a divine plan to save me before I turned 21. I can't imagine what my life would be like otherwise. My biggest advice for you, if you'll go to 2 slides, don't chase things of this world. You guys live in a world where people are going to tell you that it's fun to drink and it's fun to do drugs, but I promise it's not worth it. You will not find your worth in it, you won't find happiness in it, and you won't find joy in it. My second biggest piece of advice for you guys is don't be ashamed of your testimony. It's hard for me to be surrounded by people who grew up in a Christian home and not feel ashamed of my past. But God is really working with me to tell me that it's not my burden to carry anymore, that when he died on the cross, he took that burden from me, and it's not mine to carry. So as you go through life, as you develop a testimony, as you go through these things, it's not your shame to bear anymore. You leave it at the cross and then share your testimony, because it's God's redemption in your life, and it's pretty awesome. And that's it. Back to you.